The Great Hall of Nexus Prime Station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of alien species took their seats. The massive chamber could hold 10,000 beings, and today it was nearly full. Delegates whispered among themselves, in various languages, creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and musical tones that echoed off the metallic walls. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where speakers would address the assembly. Today's gathering was special. The Galactic Defense Council had called this meeting to discuss the newest members of their alliance, the humans. These strange bipedal creatures from a small blue planet had recently made first contact with the galactic community, and their application for membership was being reviewed. But there were concerns. Rumors had spread throughout the galaxy about these humans and their military capabilities. Some called them savages. Others whispered that they were the most dangerous species ever discovered. The council needed facts, not rumors, which was why they had summoned their most experienced witness. Commander Zethor entered the hall through the main doors, and conversations died as beings turned to look at him. He was a Catherian, standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like natural armor plating. Scars covered his body, telling the story of countless battles across the galaxy. His species was known for their warrior, culture, and physical strength, making them some of the most feared fighters in known space. Zethor walked slowly toward the platform, his heavy footsteps echoing in the now silent chamber. He had served as a mercenary for over 30 years, fighting in conflicts on 17 different worlds. His reputation was legendary among military circles. He had never been defeated in single combat and had led successful campaigns against some of the galaxy's most dangerous enemies. But today, as he approached the speaking platform, something was different about the great warrior. Those who knew him well could see it in his eyes, a haunted look that had not been there before his encounters with the humans. His usual confident stride seemed more careful, more measured. The council chairman, a tall crystalline being called Veltaran Prime, rose from his seat and addressed the assembly. His voice rang clear through the hall's translation systems, allowing every species present to understand his words. Honored delegates, we gather today to hear testimony about the species known as humans. As you know, these beings have requested membership in our alliance, but questions remain about their nature and capabilities. We have asked Commander Zethor to speak because he is the only warrior in our records who has faced human military forces in combat and survived to tell about it. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Many had heard whispers about Zethor's encounters with humans, but few knew the details. The fact that the galaxy's most decorated warrior was the only survivor of such encounters spoke volumes about human fighting abilities. Zethor reached the platform and turned to face the assembly. For a moment he stood silent, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but carried an undertone that made even the bravest warriors in the audience shift uncomfortably. Honored delegates, I have fought beside and against many species in my years of service. I have seen the Andromedan shock troops charge into plasma fire without fear. I have watched Nethian gas warriors phase through solid matter to strike at their enemies. I have commanded hive soldiers who would sacrifice themselves without question for the good of their colony. He paused, and the silence in the hall was complete. But in all my years of warfare, across all the battles I have fought, nothing prepared me for my encounters with the humans. Today, I will tell you 3 stories, 3 battles where I faced these creatures in combat. I survived these encounters, but I am not the same warrior I was before them. Zethor's words sent a chill through the assembly. Delegates leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear what could have shaken the galaxy's most fearless warrior. I must warn you that what I am about to share may disturb some of you. The humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They do not follow the conventional rules of warfare that govern civilized conflict. They do not surrender when faced with impossible odds. They do not retreat when their position becomes hopeless. Most frightening of all, they do not seem to fear death the way other species do. The Ketherian warrior's scarred face grew grim as he continued. In my first encounter with human forces, I learned that everything we thought we knew about warfare was incomplete. The humans taught me that there is a difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive. Most species fight to win. Humans fight as if their very existence depends on the outcome of every battle, even when the stakes seem small. Zethor looked directly at the council chairman. Before I begin my account, I want to make one thing clear to this assembly. In the 3 years since first contact was established, the humans have proven to be valuable allies. They have honored every treaty and shown respect for galactic law. But we must never forget what they are capable of when pushed to their limits. The great warrior took a deep breath before beginning his tale. My first encounter with human military forces occurred during what they now call the Siege of Kepler Station. Zethor's voice echoed through the silent assembly hall as he began his account of the Siege of Kepler Station. Every delegate leaned forward, eager to hear what had shaken the galaxy's most fearsome warrior. I was serving as a senior commander for the Andromedan Trade Consortium at the time. Our mission seemed simple: remove a small human mining operation that had established itself in what the Andromedans claimed was their territory. Our intelligence reports suggested we were facing fewer than 200 humans with basic mining equipment and minimal defenses. The Ketherian warrior paused, his forearms clasping behind his back as he recalled the events. The Andromedans had hired a force of 3,000 mercenaries, including 500 of my own Ketherian shock troops. We had heavy weapons, orbital, support, and advanced battle suits. The humans had improvised barriers made from mining equipment and what appeared to be civilian clothing for uniforms. We expected the operation to last no more than 3 days. Zethor's expression darkened as he continued. We were wrong about everything. The human commander was Colonel Jake Morrison, a man who looked smaller and weaker than any warrior I had ever faced. When we demanded their surrender over the communication channels, Morrison's response was simple. He told us to come and take the station if we could. Several delegates in the audience exchanged glances. The idea of such a small force challenging a vastly superior enemy seemed impossible to most species. The first assault began at dawn on the second day. My Ketherian troops led the charge, confident that our superior strength and armor would quickly overwhelm the human defenders. We had not advanced 50 meters before we realized our mistake. Zethor's voice grew quieter, forcing the assembly to strain to hear his words. The humans had turned every piece of mining equipment into a weapon. Drilling lasers became sniper rifles, excavation charges became bombs. Even their food preparation areas had been converted into weapons manufacturing centers. But that was not the most disturbing discovery. The warrior's scarred face showed something that looked almost like fear. What truly shocked us was how the humans fought when wounded. My species is known for our pain tolerance and battle fury, but we have limits. When a Ketherian warrior is severely injured, he retreats to recover or dies fighting. The humans did neither. Zethor turned to address a section of the assembly where several medical delegates sat. I watched a human female, Sergeant Lisa Kane, continue fighting for 6 hours after losing her left arm to plasma fire. She used her remaining hand to operate a heavy mining laser, picking off my troops one by one. When we finally reached her position, she was unconscious from blood loss, but still gripping her weapon. A collective gasp went through the medical section of the assembly. Such behavior was unheard of among civilized species. But Sergeant Kane was not unique among the human defenders. Private Ryan Clark fought for 2 days with what our medics later determined were 3 broken ribs and internal bleeding. Corporal Amy Foster continued to coordinate defensive positions even after taking a direct hit from a plasma rifle that would have killed most species instantly. Zethor began pacing across the platform, his agitation clear. By the end of the first week, we had lost over 400 troops while the humans had lost perhaps 30. Our morale was breaking while theirs seemed to grow stronger with each day of fighting. They began using psychological warfare tactics that none of us had prepared for. The Ketherian warriors stopped pacing and faced the assembly directly. The humans started broadcasting messages to our troops during the night cycles, not threats or demands for surrender, but stories. They told us about their families back on Earth. They described their children and their homes. They made us see them as individuals rather than just enemies. It was more effective than any weapon they could have used against us. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Such tactics were considered unsporting by most galactic military codes. By the second week, some of my own troops were refusing direct orders to attack human positions. The Andromedans brought in additional forces, increasing our numbers to nearly 5,000. The humans still numbered fewer than 150 combat-effective personnel. Zethor's voice took on a tone of grudging respect. Colonel Morrison adapted to our new tactics within hours. He divided his remaining forces into small groups and began guerrilla warfare throughout the station. The humans seemed to need no sleep and very little food. They appeared from ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, and storage areas at all hours of the day and night. The warrior's account was painting a picture of human endurance that seemed impossible to many species in the audience. The most terrifying moment came during the third week when we finally cornered Morrison and his remaining troops in the station's command center. We had them completely surrounded with no possibility of escape. Our commander demanded their surrender, offering them honorable treatment as prisoners of war. Zethor paused, and the silence in the hall was complete. Morrison's response was to activate the station's self-destruct sequence. He looked directly at our commander through the communication screen and said, "If we cannot have this station, then no one can." The humans were prepared to die rather than surrender, and they were willing to take all of us with them. Several delegates gasped at this revelation. The idea of choosing mutual destruction over surrender was alien to most species. Our forces had less than 10 minutes to evacuate the station before it exploded. As we retreated to our ships, I could see the remaining humans through the command center windows. They were not panicking or showing fear. They were calmly preparing for death, some of them actually smiling. Zethor's voice carried a note of something approaching awe. At the last moment, our commander agreed to Morrison's terms for safe passage off the station. The humans deactivated the self-destruct sequence and allowed us to withdraw. But the message was clear. They would rather die than be conquered. The Ketherian warrior looked out over the assembly, meeting the eyes of various delegates. That was my introduction to human warfare. I learned that day that humans do not fight like other species. They do not calculate odds or weigh costs against benefits. When they commit to a battle, they commit completely, holding nothing back. Zethor straightened to his full height. The siege of Kepler Station lasted 3 weeks instead of 3 days. We lost over 800 troops. The humans lost less than 50. But more importantly, we lost something that no warrior can afford to lose: our certainty that superior numbers and firepower guarantee victory. The assembly hall remained dead silent as Zethor prepared to continue his testimony. The Ketherian warrior's first account had clearly disturbed many of the delegates, but they needed to hear more to understand what they were dealing with. My second encounter with human forces occurred 2 years after the Kepler Station incident. By then, I had returned to service with the elite Ketherian strike force. We had been hired by the Galactic Shipping Guild to deal with what they claimed were human pirates attacking their cargo vessels in the Helix Nebula asteroid field. Zethor's expression grew darker as he recalled the events. Our intelligence suggested we were hunting a small group of raiders operating 3 or 4 modified cargo ships. The guild was offering substantial payment for their capture or destruction. As the most experienced anti-piracy unit in Ketherian space, we were confident this would be a routine operation. The warrior began pacing again, his heavy footsteps the only sound in the vast chamber. We entered the asteroid field with 12 heavy cruisers and over 300 fighter craft. Our ships were equipped with the latest weapons and shield technology. Each vessel was crewed by experienced Ketherian warriors who had fought pirates across a dozen star systems. Several military delegates in the audience nodded approvingly. Such a force would be more than adequate to deal with any normal piracy operation. We detected the human ships quickly enough, 5 vessels hiding among the larger asteroids. They appeared to be converted mining ships with makeshift weapon systems. Our tactical analysis suggested they would try to flee when they detected our approach. Zethor stopped pacing and turned to face the assembly. Instead, the humans attacked us. 5 small ships against 12 heavy cruisers, and they chose to fight rather than run. Their leader was Captain Rick Stone, a human male who looked even smaller and more fragile than Colonel Morrison. His tactical officer was Lieutenant D. Amy Foster, a young female who appeared barely old enough for military service. The Ketherian warrior's voice carried a note of disbelief even years after the event. Captain Stone's opening move was to ram one of our cruisers with his own ship. Not a glancing blow or a tactical strike, a full-speed collision that destroyed both vessels instantly. The humans sacrificed their command ship and their captain's life in the first 30 seconds of the engagement. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Such tactics were considered suicide by every known military doctrine. Lieutenant Foster immediately took command of the remaining human vessels and continued the attack. The humans began using the asteroids, themselves as weapons, pushing large rocks into our flight paths with tractor beams and explosive charges. They turned the entire asteroid field into a 3-dimensional battlefield. Zethor's account painted a picture of warfare unlike anything the delegates had heard before. Our pilots were trained for ship-to-ship combat in open space. The humans forced us to fight in a maze of floating rocks where our superior numbers became a disadvantage. They knew every asteroid in that field, while we were navigating blind through their territory. The warrior's respect for human tactics was clear in his voice, despite himself. The most disturbing aspect of the battle was how the humans used their own damaged ships. When one of their vessels lost main power, instead of abandoning it, they rigged it as a floating bomb. When another ship suffered hull breaches, they deliberately vented atmosphere to create a gas cloud that interfered with our sensors. Several delegates looked confused. The idea of deliberately damaging one's own equipment for tactical advantage was foreign to most species. But the moment that truly demonstrated human nature came when Lieutenant Foster's own ship was critically damaged. Her vessel was losing atmosphere. Her weapons were offline and she had no chance of escape. By all logical military thinking, she should have surrendered or abandoned ship. Zethor's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Instead, Foster piloted her dying ship on a collision course with our flagship. She sent one final transmission to her remaining vessels. Continue the mission. Make them pay for every meter. Then she cut communication and prepared to ram our command ship. The silence in the assembly was complete. Even the most warlike species represented had concepts of honor that included self-preservation. Our flagship managed to destroy Foster's ship before impact, but the explosion damaged our main weapons array. More importantly, it demoralized our crews. They had just watched a young human female choose certain death over surrender, and it shook them badly. Zethor resumed his pacing, clearly agitated by the memory. The remaining 2 human ships continued fighting for another 6 hours. They had no hope of victory, no possibility of escape, and no rational reason to continue the engagement. But they fought on, using tactics that seemed to come from madness rather than military training. The Ketherian warrior stopped and addressed the medical section of the assembly again. At one point, we captured a human pilot whose ship had been disabled. He was severely injured and should have been grateful for medical treatment. Instead, he spent his recovery time studying our ship layouts and weapon systems. When he was strong enough to move, he escaped custody and sabotaged 3 of our fighters before we recaptured him. Several medical delegates looked disturbed by this account. Most species considered medical treatment during warfare to be sacred and neutral. The battle finally ended when our remaining forces withdrew from the asteroid field. We had lost 4 cruisers and nearly 100 fighters. The humans had lost all 5 of their ships and every member of their crews. By any military standard, we had won a decisive victory. Zethor's expression suggested that victory had not felt much like winning, but the cost was too high for what should have been a simple anti-piracy operation. More importantly, word of the battle spread through Ketherian military circles. Our warriors began to fear encounters with human forces, even when they had overwhelming advantages. The warrior faced the assembly with a grim expression. The Helix Nebula engagement taught me that humans view death in battle differently than other species. For most of us, death is the ultimate failure, the end of our ability to serve our cause. For humans, death in battle seems to be just another tactical option, one they choose without hesitation when it serves their purposes. Zethor's voice grew stronger as he concluded his second account. Captain Stone and Lieutenant Foster could have escaped that asteroid field if they had chosen to run. They could have surrendered when the odds became impossible. Instead, they chose to fight and die, taking as many of us with them as possible. They turned a simple piracy operation into a nightmare that still haunts Ketherian military academies. The warrior looked out over the silent assembly. After the Helix Nebula, I thought I understood human warfare. I believed I had seen the worst they were capable of. I was wrong. My third encounter with human forces would teach me that everything I had witnessed before was nothing compared to what humans could do when they were truly desperate. Zethor stood motionless on the platform for several moments before beginning his third and most disturbing account. The assembly hall was so quiet that the soft hum of the station's life support systems seemed loud in comparison. My final encounter with human forces took place on the jungle world of Titan VII, approximately 18 months after the Helix Nebula incident. I had been promoted to Supreme Commander of a full Ketherian invasion force, serving under contract with the Zeronian Empire. The warrior's voice carried a weight that had not been present in his earlier accounts. Our mission was to secure a human research facility that the Zeronians claimed was conducting illegal experiments in their territory. Intelligence reports indicated a small scientific outpost with fewer than 2,000 personnel, mostly civilian researchers with minimal security forces. Zethor began pacing again, but his movements were more agitated than before. I commanded 50,000 troops, including 20,000 Ketherian warriors, 15,000 Zeronian regulars, and 15,000 auxiliary forces from various mercenary companies. We had air support, orbital bombardment capabilities, and enough firepower to level a small city. The scale of the force impressed many delegates. Such numbers would be sufficient to conquer most worlds, let alone a single research facility, the May. Human facility was located deep in Titan VII's jungle, a tropical environment that our environmental suits handled easily. The research station appeared to be a collection of prefabricated buildings connected by walkways, with some basic defensive barriers but no heavy weapons. Zethor's expression grew troubled as he continued. The human commander was Major Dan Cooper, a career military officer who had been assigned to protect the research facility. His second-in-command was Dr. Helen Morris, the chief scientist who supposedly had no military training at all. Between them, they commanded fewer than 300 actual soldiers and about 1,700 civilian researchers. The warrior stopped pacing and addressed the assembly directly. When we demanded their surrender, Major Cooper's response was to invite us to come and take the facility if we thought we could. Dr. Morris added that they looked forward to studying our tactical capabilities. Even then, I should have recognized the warning signs. Several military delegates leaned forward. The idea of civilian scientists threatening seasoned warriors seemed absurd. Our first assault began at dawn on the third day after our arrival. We expected token resistance followed by quick surrender when the civilians realized the hopelessness of their situation. Instead, the humans simply vanished. Zethor's voice took on an almost mystified tone. When our forces reached the research facility, it was completely empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of where nearly 2,000 people had gone. The buildings were intact but abandoned, as if the humans had simply walked into the jungle and disappeared. The mystery clearly still bothered the Ketherian commander. We established a base at the research facility and began searching the surrounding jungle. That was when we learned our first lesson about human adaptability. The jungle of Titan 7 was hot, humid, and filled with dangerous wildlife. Our environmental suits protected us, but they also made us slow and clumsy in the dense vegetation. Zethor's account was painting a picture of an environment that favored the defenders. The humans had no environmental suits, no heavy equipment, and no apparent shelter. Yet they survived in that jungle for 8 months while conducting the most effective guerrilla campaign I have ever witnessed. The warrior's respect for human capabilities was clear despite himself. The attacks began on our 4th day planet side. Not direct assaults, but sabotage and harassment that slowly wore down our forces. Equipment would malfunction mysteriously. Sentries would disappear without a sound. Supply drops would be contaminated or destroyed before we could retrieve them. Zethor turned to address the scientific delegates in the assembly. Dr. Morris had somehow weaponized the jungle itself. She introduced modified organisms that ate through our equipment, created chemical compounds that fouled our water supplies, and bred insects that seemed specifically designed to target our species' weak points. Several scientific delegates looked impressed, despite themselves. Such biological warfare required sophisticated knowledge and improvised laboratory facilities. But the most disturbing aspect was how the civilian researchers had been turned into effective guerrilla fighters. These were scientists, engineers, and support staff with no military training, yet they moved through the jungle like elite commandos. The warrior's voice carried a note of disbelief. Major Cooper had somehow organized 1,700 civilians into squads that could strike at our forces and disappear without a trace. They used their scientific equipment as weapons, their research data as tactical intelligence, and their knowledge of the local environment as their greatest advantage. Zethor began describing specific incidents that clearly still haunted him. Dr. Morris created biological agents that could distinguish between human and non-human DNA, allowing them to poison our food supplies without harming themselves. The geologists used their knowledge of soil composition to create sinkholes that swallowed our vehicles. The botanists bred plants that produced toxins specifically designed to affect Ketherian respiratory systems. The assembly was beginning to understand the scope of what they were hearing. These were not traditional military tactics, but something entirely new. As the weeks passed, our forces began to suffer from what your human psychologists would call battle fatigue. My warriors were not fighting an enemy they could see and engage directly. They were fighting the jungle itself, and they were losing. Zethor's voice grew darker. By the 6th month, we had lost over 15,000 troops to disease, accidents, and guerrilla attacks. The humans had revealed themselves so rarely that we had killed fewer than 50 of them. Our morale was collapsing, and requests for evacuation were increasing daily. The warrior's account was demonstrating human capabilities that went far beyond normal military doctrine. The breaking point came when human reinforcements arrived. A single ship landed at our base perimeter and outstepped General Pete Harrison with 300 Marines from the 3rd Division. They were fresh troops, well-equipped and ready for battle. Zethor's expression showed something approaching terror at the memory. At the same moment, the jungle came alive with humans. The original defenders, who we thought had been reduced to small scattered groups, emerged from everywhere at once. They had been hiding in plain sight for 8 months, growing stronger while we grew weaker. The warrior's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 1,700 civilian researchers had become 1,700 jungle fighters. They moved like shadows, struck like lightning, and seemed to know every tree and rock in that jungle. They had not been struggling to survive. They had been studying us, learning our weaknesses, and preparing for this moment. Zethor straightened to his full height, but there was defeat in his posture. The sight of fresh human troops arriving, while the supposedly defeated colonists emerged from the jungle, destroyed what remained of our morale. My remaining forces refused to continue fighting. They had seen enough of human warfare to know that victory was impossible. The Ketherian. Commander's final words on Titan 7 carried the weight of absolute conviction. We evacuated the planet the next day, leaving behind 25,000 dead and the knowledge that human civilians could be more dangerous than most species' elite warriors. Dr. Morris sent us a farewell message thanking us for providing such an interesting research opportunity and inviting us to return anytime we wanted to contribute to their studies. The assembly hall remained in stunned silence as Zethor completed his account of the Titan 7 campaign. The Ketherian warrior stood motionless for several long moments, gathering himself before delivering what would prove to be the most disturbing revelation of all. Honored delegates, those 3 encounters taught me that humans were unlike any species we had faced before. Their tactics, their endurance, and their refusal to accept defeat marked them as formidable opponents. But I believed I had seen the full extent of their capabilities. Zethor's voice carried a grim certainty that made even the bravest delegates shift uncomfortably. I was wrong. The most frightening discovery came after first contact was established and diplomatic relations began. Through intelligence exchanges and joint military exercises, I learned the truth about the human forces I had faced. The warrior paused, seeming to struggle with what he was about to reveal. The humans at Kepler Station in the Helix Nebula and on Titan 7 were not elite troops. They were not special forces or veteran units. They were standard military personnel, colonial guards, and in one case, civilian researchers with minimal combat training. A collective gasp went through the assembly. Several delegates began whispering among themselves, clearly disturbed by this information. Colonel Morrison of the 5th Earth Expeditionary Force was commanding what humans consider a routine deployment unit. Captain Stone and Lieutenant Foster were part of a standard patrol squadron. Major Cooper was leading a basic security detachment, and Dr. Morris was simply a research scientist with no formal military rank at all. Zethor's revelation was rewriting everything the assembly thought they knew about human military capabilities. During the diplomatic exchanges that followed first contact, I gained access to intercepted human communications from the periods of our encounters. What I discovered changed my understanding of warfare itself. The Ketherian warrior activated a holographic display that showed fragments of intercepted messages. The text appeared in various galactic languages as the translation systems processed it. This message was sent from Colonel Morrison to Earth Command during the Kepler Station siege. Alien forces are using standard assault tactics. Recommend continued defensive posture to assess their full capabilities. Estimate we can hold position indefinitely if necessary. Several military delegates looked confused. The message suggested confidence rather than desperation. This communication came from Captain Stone just before the Helix Nebula engagement. 5 enemy cruisers detected, proceeding with reconnaissance in force. Will gather intelligence on their weapon systems and tactical doctrine before withdrawal. Zethor's voice grew darker as he continued. And this final message was transmitted by Dr. Morris during the 8th month on Titan 7. Biological warfare protocols are proving highly effective. Recommend continued testing of alien physiological vulnerabilities. Subject species show interesting psychological responses to prolonged asymmetric engagement. The assembly was beginning to understand the implications. The humans had not been fighting for survival. They had been conducting experiments. The humans were testing us. Every engagement, every battle, every desperate last stand was actually a carefully controlled experiment designed to measure our capabilities and discover our weaknesses. Zethor turned to address different sections of the assembly as he continued his revelation. The intercepted communications revealed that human military doctrine includes something they call reconnaissance in force, deliberately engaging superior enemies to study their tactics and capabilities. What I thought were desperate defensive actions were actually data-gathering operations. The warrior's voice carried a mixture of admiration and fear, but the most disturbing discovery was learning about the human military units I never encountered. The forces I faced were deliberately chosen to reveal as little as possible about true human capabilities while gathering maximum intelligence about their opponents. Zethor activated new displays showing organizational charts and unit designations. Earth maintains military formations that even their own standard forces speak of with reverence. Elite ranger battalions that specialize in impossible missions. Special operations forces that operate behind enemy lines for years at a time. Something called the Night Wolves that even veteran human soldiers refuse to discuss in detail. The implications were staggering. If standard human forces could achieve what Zethor had witnessed, what could their elite units accomplish? I requested permission to review human military records during the diplomatic exchanges. What I learned is that the units I fought were specifically selected for these encounters because they were expendable. The humans were willing to sacrifice them to gain intelligence about potential galactic threats. Zethor's next revelation sent a chill through the entire assembly. Admiral Susan Blake, the human officer who ultimately authorized first contact, sent this message to Earth Command after reviewing reports of our encounters. Field testing of alien military capabilities complete. Recommend initiation of diplomatic contact. Continued conflict serves no strategic purpose now that we have adequate intelligence on their combat effectiveness. The silence in the hall was absolute. The assembled delegates were beginning to grasp the full scope of human strategic thinking. The humans had been deliberately revealing just enough of their capabilities to make us respect them while concealing their true strength. Every battle I thought I had won was actually a human intelligence operation that succeeded perfectly. Zethor's voice took on a tone of grudging respect, mixed with genuine fear. During a recent joint training exercise, I had the opportunity to observe human special forces in action. What I saw made everything I had experienced before seem like children playing war games. The warrior's account was building to a conclusion that would shake the galactic community's understanding of human capabilities. The most chilling moment came during a conversation with Colonel Morrison after he was assigned as a human liaison to the Galactic Defense Force. I asked him directly about the true extent of human military capabilities. Zethor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper as he recounted Morrison's response. Morrison looked at me with what humans call a smile and said, "Commander, you have seen us when we were just trying to survive and gather intelligence. Pray to whatever gods you believe in that you never see us when we are actually trying to win a war." The warrior's final words carried the weight of absolute conviction. Honored delegates, we have been measuring human capabilities by observing them at their most restrained. The humans who fought me were following strict rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties and maximize intelligence gathering. We have never seen them when those restraints are removed. Zethor faced the assembly with an expression that mixed respect and terror. The humans allowed us to think we understood them while learning everything they needed to know about us. They turned our aggression into their intelligence advantage and our victories into their strategic gains. We were never fighting humans at war. We were participating in human research projects. Zethor stood before the assembled delegates, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he prepared to deliver his final assessment. The revelations about human strategic thinking had left the assembly in stunned silence, but the Ketherian warriors' most important words were yet to come. Honored delegates, I have shared these accounts not to frighten you, but to ensure that our alliance with humanity is built on a foundation of truth rather than illusion. The humans have proven to be valuable allies in the 3 years since first contact, but we must never forget what lies beneath their diplomatic courtesy. The warrior's voice carried the authority of someone who had seen humanity's capabilities firsthand. Since joining our alliance, the humans have honored every treaty, respected galactic law, and contributed significantly to our collective defense efforts. They have shared technology, provided humanitarian aid, and shown remarkable restraint in dealing with species that still harbor suspicions about their intentions. Zethor paused to let this positive assessment settle before continuing. But this cooperation comes with a price that we must be willing to pay. We must accept that humanity will always be the most dangerous species in our alliance, not because they are evil or aggressive, but because they approach conflict with a mindset that no other species can match. The warrior began pacing across the platform as he delivered his analysis. Most species in this galaxy fight to achieve specific objectives. We seek territory, resources, or political advantage. When the cost of achieving these goals becomes too high, we negotiate or withdraw. This is rational behavior that allows for diplomatic solutions and peaceful coexistence. Zethor's expression grew somber as he continued. Humans fight differently. When they commit to a conflict, they commit completely. They do not calculate acceptable losses or weigh costs against benefits in the same way other species do. They fight as if the very existence of their species depends on the outcome of every battle, no matter how small the stakes appear to outside observers. Several delegates nodded, recognizing this assessment from Zethor's earlier accounts. This difference in approach makes humans extremely valuable as allies, but potentially catastrophic as enemies. A species that will sacrifice its own ships to gather intelligence, turn civilian scientists into guerrilla fighters, and choose mutual destruction over surrender cannot be defeated using conventional military thinking. The warrior's voice took on a tone of urgent warning. I have spent considerable time studying human military history since first contact was established. What I learned should concern every species in this assembly. Humans have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire recorded history. They have developed tactics and strategies that no other species has needed to consider. Zethor activated displays showing fragments of human historical records. Humans have concepts like total war, where entire civilizations mobilize every resource for military purposes. They have doctrines of mutually assured destruction, where victory is defined as making the cost of defeat unacceptable to both sides. They have strategies called scorched earth, where they destroy their own resources rather than allow enemies to capture them. The displays showed images that disturbed many delegates: cities reduced to rubble, landscapes scarred by weapons, populations displaced by conflicts that had consumed entire continents. These are not theoretical concepts for humans. They are proven strategies that they have used successfully against enemies of their own species, enemies who think like them, fight like them, and understand their capabilities. Zethor's voice carried a note of genuine concern for the assembled delegates. We do not think like humans. We do not fight like humans, and we certainly do not understand their true capabilities. This makes us vulnerable in ways that most species have never needed to consider. The warrior turned to address the Galactic Council directly. My recommendation to this assembly is simple but critical. We must do everything in our power to ensure that humans remain our allies, not because we fear them, but because having them as enemies would be a catastrophe beyond our ability to comprehend or survive. Zethor's final assessment carried the weight of hard-earned experience. Humans have a saying that I learned during my time working with their liaison officers. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog. By any physical measure, humans are small dogs, but they have the fight of creatures 10 times their size. The warrior's voice grew stronger as he delivered his conclusions. Every species in this galaxy has advantages over humans in some area. The Ketherians are stronger. The Veltari are more technologically advanced. The Nethians can phase through matter. The hive species have perfect coordination and collective intelligence. Zethor paused to let this sink in before continuing. But no species combines intelligence, adaptability, pain tolerance, and sheer refusal to accept defeat the way humans do. They are individually weak, but collectively unstoppable when properly motivated. The warrior's final words would be remembered by every delegate present. The humans who fought me were following rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties and gather intelligence. They were operating under diplomatic constraints that required them to avoid escalation. They were trying to survive and learn, not to win at any cost. Zethor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast assembly hall. We have never seen humans when they are actually trying to win a war. We have never faced them when their survival is truly threatened. We have never encountered them when they decide that the cost of victory is acceptable, regardless of what that cost might be. The Ketherian warrior straightened to his full height for his final statement. I pray to my ancestors that we never do. Because on that day we will discover that everything we think we know about warfare is obsolete. On that day, we will learn that humans have been holding back not just their elite forces, but their most dangerous capability of all, their willingness to do whatever is necessary to protect what they consider important. Zethor began walking toward the exit, but stopped at the edge of the platform to deliver one final observation. As I prepared for today's testimony, delegates approached me privately, asking if my accounts were exaggerated for dramatic effect. My response is simple. I left out the worst parts because this assembly is not ready to hear them. The warrior's final words echoed through the silent chamber. The humans are our allies now, and they have proven their value many times over. But never forget that their friendship is a gift, not a right. They chose to join our alliance when they could have easily conquered it. They chose cooperation when domination would have been simpler. They chose to reveal some of their capabilities when they could have remained hidden until it was too late for us to respond. Zethor's parting warning would shape galactic policy for generations to come. Treat them with the respect they have earned, honor the treaties they have signed, and remember that our continued existence may depend on ensuring that humans never have reason to regret their decision to join us rather than replace us. With those words, the galaxy's most decorated warrior left the assembly hall, leaving behind delegates who finally understood what they had welcomed into their alliance, and what they must never allow to become their enemy.